Okay, we continue on Niners Radio Live as part two. We sorry for the technical difficulties we had, so we're going to continue on Radio 49 Live, the Super Bowl 58 edition. We're a little under the 28 hours or 24 hours away from Super Sunday. That will be tomorrow. Just a program reminder, we will have a Niners Radio 49 tonight. We'll have it later tonight on satellite digital media. There is some Chiefs fans, a couple with two kids with the Chiefs uh, went past our vicinity, getting ready for Niners and Chiefs. Just a reminder. Well, we're just gonna keep on with this. Looking at the Chiefs or the 49ers end up dominating that game, and so I got the wrong one anyway, so I'm going to get rid of this one. So looking at the final numbers of this game. So after the game, or after when the game ended, 49ers offensive line dominated the Dolphins' undersized defensive line. Montana was sacked only one time. Offensive line coach Bob McKittrick recalled that his linemen looked at film of the game. They were surprised to see how one-sided the matchup was. According to McKittrick, the lineman was wondered, this is a Super Bowl defense, or this is a Super Bowl defense. Walsh recalled he could use a difference between the 49ers and the Dolphins during warm-ups. According to Walsh, it was obviously that the Dolphins were a one-dimensional team with no real ground game to complement Marino's passing, and they were nowhere near physical as the 49ers, and I totally agree. So right there, Joe Montana won his second MVP. The Niners, by virtue of their win, won their second Super Bowl title in 4 years and put them up as one of the elite teams. And we just and we're going to stop it right there. We'll have a special edition of Niners Radio 49, and we're going to have it simulcast later this evening on satellite digital media live later tonight, later this evening, as we'll get you ready for the Super Bowl, Super Sunday tomorrow, Niners and the Chiefs. And we're just get some what's going on. We're going to shift our gears to and some Niners news. The 49ers also today has elevated defensive lineman Alex Barrett and T.Y. McGill from the practice squad. Also, defensive lineman Kayla Davis has been downgraded to out for the game. And then the Kansas City Chiefs, they're going to miss one of their stars with a pectoral muscle. He will not play. So we're going to just continue on Niners Radio 49. We got some quick news I want to get through for all of our Niner fans who did not make the trip down to Vegas. This is from the mayor's office and from the San Francisco mayor's office. I want to get to that. We're going to get ready to wrap it up in a few minutes. It's starting to get cool down. And this was from the Mayor London Breed. This is from the mayor's office. Get ready, San Francisco, tomorrow, Super Bowl 58. And couldn't be prouder for a team that fought, lit up the scoreboard all year, is ready to take on the Chiefs this Sunday in Vegas. If you're looking to cheer for the San Francisco with your fellow faithful Sunday, both crossing at East Cut Thrive City will be hosting public watch parties. And of course, our city will be filled with amazing bars, restaurants will be packed with fans. Head out to in your local neighborhoods and support your local business with your fellow San Franciscans. Remember, no matter where you choose to go and watch, be safe, be smart, don't drive if you've been drinking. Muni is a great option. Let's go Niners. So that was from the great that's just a message from Mayor London Breed. Here's something I'm looking at here right now where this is between what happened between then and now in 2020. In 2020, Niners Chiefs Super Bowl, Lamar Jackson wins the MVP both times. Ravens win the AFC North both times. The Texans win the AFC South with 10 wins. Chiefs win the AFC West. Chargers finished dead last. Washington finished dead last in the East. The Niners win the AFC West. The Niners were the number one seed. And then COVID started in March. COVID Part 2 starts in March. I just don't see that happening because I think there's enough vaccinated. And so we're gonna. There's some more photos from a lot of the fans of enjoying their time down there. And just a reminder again, tomorrow we'll have our special. Later tonight we'll have our Niners Super Bowl 58 special. We'll be at the Satellite Digital Media Studios on Niners Radio 49. We'll be simulcasting it later this evening back in our studios later tonight. Get you ready for Super Bowl Sunday tomorrow. And then we'll have a special pregame show. We'll have expanded pregame show at our studio. Then we'll be on location as well to bring you coverage of Super Bowl 58. Game, of course, will be on CBS. And Jim Nance with Tony Romo will give you the call on CBS. And we'll also be having post-game live immediately after the contest. So as we got finished with this part, we'll also later on this evening, we'll do the 1988 and 89 and 94 seasons of the Super Bowl season as well. So the Niners at this point have won 2 Super Bowls in 4 years. They beat the Bengals. And you look at the 2 Super Bowls, how they won it. 1981, of course, they won the Super Bowl 16. That was unexpected because that was for the Super Bowl they won in 81 was for all the years of the lean, hard times they went through the late 70s. And especially, things really bottom out in the late 70s, going back-to-back 2-14 seasons in both 1978 and in 79, which 79 was Bill Walsh's first year as Niners head coach. They would turn, and then they improved to 6-10 in 1980. They would go 13-3 with the best record in football in '81. They would go on after beating the Cowboys in the NFC Championship, the catch that started everything for the 49ers. They would beat the Cincinnati Bengals to win that first Super Bowl. And then in '84, the Niners, best record in all of football, 15-1. Their only blemish, their only defeat was to the Steelers, and they boat raced through the division title and dominated in postseason to win their second Super Bowl in 4 years. And from this point now, with the Niners with 2 Super Bowl wins in a 4-year span, people talking about, is this Niners team is the next dynasty? They definitely, by winning 2 Super Bowls, 2 out of the last 4 years, have took that next step. They're earning that claim of being the team of the 80s. So you look at back in perspective, there's a lot more football to be played. I want to, before we leave tonight, before we go off the air, we're going to do a little special interview, or actually a little clip I really want to share. This was an interview did by Wayne Walker, Bill Walsh interview from KPIX. Of course, the late Bill Walsh and Wayne Walker, who was a longtime sports director for KPIX, CBS 5, and talk about both the 1981 and 84 seasons. And this is a good interview. This was from a 49er team highlight video. So this is a good interview. I would advise, I'm going to play that interview. We're going to play that interview. I think this interview was from 1987. So we're going to and you're gonna like this interview by Bill Walsh. So we're gonna play it right now, and before we head off, though. So enjoy this video, Niners Radio 49, the Bill Walsh interview by legendary sportscaster, the late Wayne Walker. Hope you enjoy this video.
Wayne Walker, and joining us today is the head coach of the San Francisco 49ers, Bill Walsh. We'll be taking a trip down memory lane, talking about the 49ers' 2 Super Bowl wins in the 1980s. Bill, I don't think most realize how tough it is to win a Super Bowl.
Well, it really is, because so many things have to fit together over an extended period of time, and anything can go wrong along the way that would eliminate you.
It's the 1981 season. That's the one leading up to your first Super Bowl, and you have a very young team. And
actually, we're going to stop it here. We just we're going to the qual. I don't like the quality of this, so I'm going to try to pull up a better one. But this is going to be very interesting with the 49ers of that season, talking about the first 2 Super Bowl wins, Bill Walsh and Wayne Walker. Walker, of course, at KPIX Channel 5, longtime sports director, passed away several years back. And by the way, I mean, so enjoy this treat for all you Niner fans. Enjoy this. This was a good interview. And this was, I believe, from 1987 or 88.
The 1980s. Bill, I don't think most people realize how tough it is to win a Super Bowl.
Well, it really is. So many things have to fit together over an extended period of time, and anything can go wrong along the way that would eliminate you.
It's the 1981 season. That's the one leading up to your first Super Bowl. And you have a very young team. In fact, you're starting 3 rookies in the defensive secondary. When was it during that season that you felt you could be a Super Bowl team?
Well, we really didn't know, but we thought we'd be contenders when we beat Dallas at Candlestick Park early in the year. Then as the season progressed, we had a great game against Pittsburgh in Pittsburgh, and we're one of the few NFC teams ever to win there. So then it began to develop momentum, and we didn't know how good we would be until really the final game, and we won it.
You mentioned Dallas as an opponent. You played them again in the NFC Championship game at Candlestick. That was a great game that ended with Dwight Clark's catch. Now, what really surprised me in that game was the fact you were able to run on Dallas. Tell us about that.
Well, they played a nickel defense in which they substituted a number of pass rushers and defensive backs to stop the pass. And we had a sweep play that we'd run all year that's been very effective. And we just managed to block them effectively and get outside of them before they realized what was happening. And I think really, Wayne, each time we ran it, they thought, well, that'll be the last time they do that. And we ran 7 sweeps on that final drive.
You were very confident, I remember, going into that game. I know you told me in your workouts during the week, we're a little bit quicker than they are, and they don't know it.
Well, that was true. We'd beaten them badly earlier in the year. They still had the great team, the great tradition, but we were quicker. But if you'll recall that game, there were officials' calls and all kind of things kept them in it. And finally, they went ahead with just a few minutes to go.
Now you're in the Super Bowl, and it's going to be at the Silverdome in Detroit. Now, is pressure's off you then?
Well, not really. We realized after beating Cincinnati earlier in the year that they had a great team and a dominating physical team. And our hope was we'd get out on them early, get a lead early, and then hold them off, and that's just what happened.
You got a big play early. Cincinnati got the ball and was driving down the field on you. They were inside your 20-yard line, and Dwight Hicks made an interception. That had to be a big play in that one.
Well, that was a big play. We managed to keep them out of the end zone that entire first half, even though they threatened a number of times. We built a 20-0 lead, and that was about all we had left. Then we held them off that entire second half, and I give a lot of credit to that young team just for that tremendous determination to win that thing.
So you've been real good in your career about protecting leads, not sitting on them, but protecting leads. And you did the same thing in that game with Cincinnati. What did you tell your team at halftime?
Well, we thought we had to score again. I said we had to have at least 7 more points. Well, we got 6 more. And then we had to shut them down. And we had a great goal line stand, if you'll recall, that stopped them on particular drives, only to have them come back again and score on us.
Watching this throwback video,
we forced them to use a lot of time
Bill Walsh
before they could score.
And Wayne Walker.
Then in the final analysis, if you'll remember, there was a great catch by Mike Wilson for a 20-yard gain, a couple of good runs, field goals, and then an interception by Eric Wright that made the difference.
You know, I was totally amazed during that game that your team was so loose. You had a bunch of young players there in a Super Bowl with all the hype going into it, and yet they were loose all week long. Now, how'd you do that with them?
Well, we had a lot of humor, and by that time we'd had a good win streak going. We were very, very confident. We'd beaten the Bengals before, and we were just young enough and foolish enough not to realize the consequences of the game, how big a game it really was. All those things added up to just the right attitude at the right time.
Let's move along now and go to the '84 season and your next Super Bowl. That was almost a miracle season for you with a great record, losing only once.
Well, that was a season you could see coming. If you remember, the year before, we were beaten out in the NFC Finals through some questionable calls, honestly. So we knew we'd have the momentum going into the next year. Everything seemed to fit together. Our team was at its best, and everyone had a great year. And so it just was the dream season. We had some close games along the way, 2 or 3 of 6-point wins or 4-point wins. But in the big games, we were so strong. We had beaten the Giants earlier, and then in the playoffs, we were able to do it. So it was one of those years that everything fit together. And after those years are completed, and then you wait a few more years, you realize how tough it is to win one and how tough it is to have a great season like that.
You drew Miami as your Super Bowl opponent, but you had a couple of factors going for you. First, you'd been in a Super Bowl before, and secondly, you were playing this one almost at home in Palo Alto. Those plus factors for you?
Oh, they really were. I think the preparation for the Super Bowl, having practiced at our regular facility, made a big difference. Because preparing for the Super Bowl, you really only get a week of practice. The second week, just prior to the game itself, is so hectic with the media crash and crunch and the attention the public gives. You just don't have time to even think. You're really operating on nerve about that time. So that first week here in Redwood City practicing really gave us an edge, I thought.
You were facing a very tough Miami team. Dan Marino had been tearing up the AFC, throwing to Clayton and Duper, and Miami, of course, coached by the great Don Shula.
Well, it was a great team. They'd gotten most of the attention. They had gotten most of the awards for outstanding player and coach, and all their passing records were creating a lot of national interest. Our team was solid, and I know the experts, or those that really know the game, felt pretty strongly that we would beat them. We were faster than they were and more explosive than they were, and it became evident pretty quickly going into the game.
It was very evident. You handled them really extremely easily. Bill, it was probably the most efficient game that I remember a team playing in the Super Bowl. You agree?
Well, it could have been. We scored in virtually every opportunity, but we had field position throughout that first half. If you'll recall, we kept forcing them to punt. They'd punt around midfield, and we'd drive it in for a touchdown. And it was a good game from the standpoint of the artistic part, because we ran well, we passed well, we rushed Marino well, we made our interceptions. So it was really the complete game.
So we mentioned earlier, Dan Marino had been burning up the National Football League, throwing to two wide receivers, Clayton and Duper, but you shut him down in that game. How'd you do it?
Well, I think the pass rush had a lot to do with it, then the changes in coverage. But we were just quick enough that it made a difference. We weren't quite getting to him, but we were forcing him to sort of rush his throws. And he was so used to doing so well. I think he, early in the game, became a little frustrated or anxious and kept waiting for something to happen. And we just kept the pressure on him, and he never could quite get in sync.
2 Super Bowl wins in the 80s. One of those carry more weight than the other?
Well, I'm sure the first one was a great thing for San Francisco. We had never won a championship in San Francisco, and our fans had waited so many years, and it was a Cinderella team. But it was a great team because we beat the best teams in the league that year twice. And so we proved that we were the true champions. The second Super Bowl was one really of an outstanding football team, in sync all season, and the chemistry of the team was just perfect.
And that second win also established you as perhaps the best team of the decade.
Well, we'll see. We still have more years to go, and we'd like to get another one.
Bill, thanks a lot for being with us today, and we'd like to thank Macy's for putting this together. Now you fans sit back and relax and enjoy some great 49ers football.
Okay, that was Bill Walsh. This was a great interview he did with Dwayne Walker at KPIX Channel 5. He, of course, was the face of the 49ers for so many years. And, I know he's up there wherever he is. He would be very proud. He was, talking in perspective, the Niners winning those first 2 Super Bowls of the 80s. 81 was a Cinderella season because nobody expected the 49ers to do that much. Maybe they were a team definitely improved from the 3 previous seasons that won a combined 10 wins in the 3 previous seasons combined. Going after, you look in perspective, the early 70s teams with Mike Nolan, John Brody, Gene Washington, the Stanford graduate. They won the first of 3 consecutive NFC West titles. They lost to Dallas twice in the NFC Championship in 1970, the first year of the NFC Championship, which was the first year of the merger. Lost to the Cowboys at Kezar Stadium, out by Golden, right on the border of Golden Gate Park, 17-10. The Niners would be the last. It would be the last game, the final game at old ancient Kezar Stadium for the 49ers, and before they moved southeast sector of town in San Francisco to Candlestick Park in 1971, playing on the new synthetic AstroTurf, and the Niners would get back there. They won the division title again in 71, and then they again lost to the Dallas Cowboys in the NFC Championship for the second year in a row at their new Palace, Texas Stadium in Irving, Texas. And then they played the Cowboys again as the Niners won their 3rd straight NFC West title. They played the Cowboys in the NFC Divisional Playoff, and they lost a heartbreaker, blowing that big lead. And Roger Staubach came back, and they won that game. That loss sent the Niners into a tailspin for the rest of the decade. John Brody retired. They would not get that close again until 1981. Dallas Cowboys would dominate, were the gold standard, the class of the NFC, no doubt. Throughout the decade in the 70s, the best record in pro football. But then, the Niners, the bomb really started to fall out in the late 70s with when Eddie DeBarlo bought the team in 1977. They went to a 5-9 season. His first year there, 5-9 back, and it had back-to-back 2-14 seasons in 78, 79. In perspective, that was some rough times for the city of San Francisco, going through the horrible ordeal of what happened with the gym with the the with the Jonestown massacre in Jonestown, the People's Temple, led by their cult, the leader, the Reverend Jim Jones, and I think over 900 people, close to 900 people. Can't keep count, lost their lives in that horrible ordeal when they drank the cyanide poisonous Kool-Aid filled with cyanide poison. Such a horrible loss. Then nothing was more compounded nearly 10 days later or 2 weeks later when Mayor George Moscone was assassinated at San Francisco City Hall by former supervisor Dan White. They had an ugly fallout because he stepped down because his position wasn't paying enough. Then they gave the role gave the then he also took out Supervisor Harvey Milk, and that devastated the city. And then Mayor Dianne Feinstein, who was the head of the supervisors, was appointed the acting mayor and finished out the rest of that term. Technically, she did not become the mayor full time, was reelected in 1980. So she held that position into 79. So nearly about 10 years at that post for Mayor Dianne Feinstein. And the Niners in 78, 2-14. Eddie DeBarlo ended up letting go Joe Thomas, the general manager, and then gave Bill Walsh the keys to build that team. And like we said, the first half, the early years wasn't all that great. They won only a combined, had another 2-14 season in 79, but they at least were able to move the football around, and they won, and they were in a lot of ball games, so they were not as bad. 79 was not as bad than the 2-14 record was misleading because at least they had a plan in place. Then in 1980, they improved to 6-10. They started the season with 3 straight wins, were 3-0, but then would not win another game for 8 weeks. Went on an 8-game losing streak. They were 3-8, and from that point forth, they were playing for pride. But one of the important wins of the 49ers in 1980 was that game against the Saints when they came back down 35-7. They scored 28 unanswered points. They would tie that game at 35. They would ultimately win that game in overtime. The Saints went through a terrible year. They went 1-15 with the worst record in football. The Niners would go on after that 8-game skid, would win 3 of their last 5 games to go 6-10. They improved by 4 games, and by that time, they were at least able to move the football. But their defense against the pass was very poor. So you knew in 81, Bill Walsh decided he's going to get his whole defense by drafting that secondary, which included Ronnie Lott, a future Hall of Famer, Carlton Williamson, Eric Wright, and then you had the Dwight Hicks came in 79, and then 81 was their magical Cinderella season because nobody expected them to win the Super Bowl in 1981. They had a 13-3 record, the best in football, pro football. They end up beating the 3 playoff teams they hooked up in the regular season. They beat them twice in the seat that year. They end up beating the Cowboys, beating both the Giants, and then they beat the Cowboys, including the catch by Dwight Clark, and then they beat the Bengals, who they beat in the regular season, to win that first Super Bowl. And that was unexpected because nobody expected the Niners to do anything in 81 but to be 500 at best, but definitely in the right track. But then 1984, 81 was a Cinderella season because it was unexpected. 84, they went 15-1. They're coming off that heartbreaking loss to the defending Super Bowl champion Redskins in the NFC Championship game in the nation's capital at RFK Stadium in Washington. They come into '84 with that chip on their shoulder. They go 15-1. Their only loss was to the Pittsburgh Steelers. They dominated through the regular season. They end up beating the Giants and the Bears. Then they beat the Dolphins at Stanford Stadium in Palo Alto to win the second Super Bowl in 4 years. So now the Niners, with 2 Super Bowls, 2 for 2 in the '80s, has kind of had the upper hand of being the dominant team, taking that next step of being on their way of being the team of the '80s. But we will get to the second half of that decade in a bit. Later tonight, we'll recap the '88 season and the '89 season and the '94 season if we have time for cramming all three. But before they got that claim, they had to go through some rough roads, had to take a few steps back a little bit to get that claim to being the team of the '80s. So that's it for now, Brian Professor B. Davis. We're going to wrap it up here in San Francisco. Hope you enjoyed this podcast of Niners Radio 49 Super Bowl 58. We will go on again later tonight back at our studios. We'll have a simulcast edition. We will get you ready for Super Sunday. We'll have a full lineup tomorrow and get you ready for Super Sunday. Niners and the Chiefs rematch of Super Bowl 54. That's a 3:30 p.m. Pacific. Game will be on KPIX CBS 5, the exclusive network Super Bowl station, with Jim Nantz and with Tony Romo, and then Greg Papa, Tim Ryan would call the game on the Niners Radio Network. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for watching this afternoon's special edition of 49ers Radio 49. I will talk to you later this evening. Enjoy the rest of your late afternoon and have a very pleasant good evening. I'll talk to you later this evening. 49ers faithful, doing it for the Bay. Go Niners.